So hello everyone, in this video we are going to see the workflow of request for change. So let's start. Before moving forward, let's understand what is a request for change or RFC. RFC is a transaction used to request a change of your software system, for example an enhancement or change to a function. RFC must pass through an approval process before a change can be made. You can categorize a RFC by the type of change, for example normal change, urgent change, and or any different kind of change. Okay, so when do we say a normal change and urgent change, what this statement means that we can assign different change document to a given RFC. Okay, as we have discussed already this in the previous video. When the request for change is approved by the change manager or employee, change documents are created from the request for change and linked to it. Okay, so this is basically what is a request for change. Now we are going to see the workflow of a request for change. So these are the different statuses that are present in the request for change. This is the standard type of request for change, and there you can see different customizations also according to our own need. We can perform different customizations in the statuses, but the statuses that we are going to discuss are the standard ones that are provided by SAP. So the first status is created. A user working in a production system can create a request for change from the SOLMAN system, allowing them to describe the situation and request a change. So what is the duty of a requester? We have already seen that a requester is responsible for creating a request for change. So when a newly request for change is created, this process will be done by a requester, and once the request for change is created, it is then saved. Then the next status is validation. Okay, so as a result of a problem, a change needs to be implemented in a production system. For this purpose, a request for change has been created. This request has to be validated by a change manager. So we have seen that the status 1 was performed by a requester. Now the status 2 will be performed by change manager. So that is how different roles comes into play during the procedure of change request management. So validation is done by change request management manager. Then the next thing is next status is to be approved. The requester for change must be approved. The request for change must be approved before a change document can be created. In the standard system, the change managers are entered as the approvers. However, you can also enter additional business partners such as the change advisory board if required. Okay, so what we understand is in the standard process, change manager is only the change approver. But if there is a different scenario, what we can do is we can insert different employees as the approver of a given RFC, and their business partner needs to be generated. Okay, so once the status is to be approved, change managers or someone from the change advisory board will perform the next operation. Then once the request for change is approved, one or more change documents numbers are generated automatically. So in the below image you can see that a particular change document, for that particular change document, which is the normal change, the ID is not yet generated. It will only be generated and after request for change is approved. So the next is request for change in the status extend scope. What is the use of extend scope? An approved request for change can still be changed, for example to extend the scope by adding further change documents. If you want to add more additional change documents to a request for change, you can perform that but for that the status for a request for change needs to be in extend scope. Next is we have request for change in the status being implemented. To release the request for further processing, the status of the request for change is then set to being implemented. Now at this point of time we need to start the development process. So for that, first of all, the request for change should be in being implemented status. So when the this is the duty of change manager to change the status to being implemented. Then request for change in status implemented. As soon as all the change documents for a request for change have been either completed or cancelled, the status of request for change is automatically set to implemented. So this is the last opportunity for the change manager to send the RFC back to rework in case of any adaptations are needed. So being implemented is the last opportunity. Until then, status can be set back to any other status previously, but once the status is implemented, after that it will get confirmed, and once it is confirmed, we can no longer move back to any other previous status. Okay, so this is the duty of change manager. If he wants, he can set the status back to any previous status, and also the status change from being implemented to implemented will happen automatically once all the change documents that are assigned to a request for change are either completed or withdrawn or rejected. Moving on to the next status, which is confirmed. If all the changes were successfully implemented, the RFC or request for change can be closed by setting the status to confirmed. So once it is clear that the requirement is completed and the change has reached to the production, then in that case change manager will set the status to confirmed, and once the status is set to confirmed, we can no longer move back to any previous status. So it is the duty of change manager to set the status to confirmed. So now there are some intermediate statuses in between, which is rejected. So let's see that what is the use of that status. If the change manager feels that the problem is not serious enough to warrant a change, he or she can reject the request. So if at any point of time change manager feels that this change does not requires to be created or is not validated, so in that case change manager can reject a particular request for change. And one thing to note is, even though if the request for change is rejected, its entry will be there in the system, and at any point of time in future we can access this request for change by accessing its transaction number, and we can see like for what purpose this was created. Okay, so this is the one of the advantages of change request management, that is provides end-to-end tracking of all the works that we are performing. Okay, so this is the workflow diagram of a request for change. So you can see that basically there are 4 major roles who are performing these different operations. One is requester, change manager, change advisory board, and backend system. So all those things that are happening automatically from the backend system will come under this section. So let's see the workflow. So create change request as a follow-up document. So it is the duty of requester to create a request for change. After that, the status will be set to invalidation by change manager. After that, the validation of request for change will happen. That will also be done by change manager. And once that is done, defining the change scope and releasing it for approval will be done by change manager. Once it is released for approval, the request for change will be approved by the person, any one person from change advisory board. Once it is approved, the change manager will hand over the request for change to development, and then once this is done, automatically the change document numbers will be generated and the change documents will be created, and this will happen automatically at the backend. Then once this is done, the status will be set to extend scope if needed. If there is a need to add more change documents to particular request for change, then in that case the status will be set to extend scope by change manager, and then it is released for approval again, because we have added further more change documents, then it needs to be approved. That is why it will be released for approval once again, and it will be again approved by the change advisory board committee, and once it is approved, it will be again hand over to the development, and again the further change documents will be created. So this was the entire workflow of a request for change. So in this video we have seen like the entire workflow from starting to end of a request for change. Now the statuses that we have seen can be deferred, because we always have the option to add customized status in request for change or change documents in SAP Solution Manager Change Request Management. So but the statuses that we are discussing in our videos are the standard statuses provided by SAP. So I hope you have got a good understanding of the workflow of request for change. Thanks for watching.